Bill.
Thank you. Thank you.
While Bill and Dylan are taking their seats, I give you a little bit of a background of Bill. He began his career as an entrepreneur at the age 17, running a small deli on Long Island. After college, he rose through the ranks at Xerox to become the company's youngest corporate officer and division president. Sounds familiar?
Yes.
So it should be no surprise that Bill's a passionate believer in engaging up-and-coming young leaders, and that's just one of the many reasons why we're so pleased to have him with us here today. Since Bill began his new role as CEO at SAP in 2014, he has helped reinvent the company in the era of mobility, cloud computing, advanced analytics, and next-generation business applications. And at this point, without any further ado, I get out of your guys' face, and I'll pass things on over to Dylan for this evening's discussion.
Thank you
Welcome
very much.
again.
Thank you. I've been traveling so much lately. I was so glad that I was asked, you know, to sound like you, because I always have to make sure I'm in the right place, you know? I'm glad to be with you guys. Thank you, Dean.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks, Tom. And thanks, Kirsten. We're really all looking forward to having you here, Bill, tonight, and so much so that I know we've got not only everybody here, but we've got some folks watching via live stream at a couple of our campuses as well as online.
Nice.
So
Thank you.
the capacity crowd for sure. And we have a couple of things for some audience interaction this evening, where if you have questions for Bill, we invite you to join in on the conversation using the hashtag BillRMcDermott, BCIT. And Bill is also on Twitter as well. You can tweet him directly, and his handle is BillRMcDermott. So with that, shall we just fire right into the first question, shall we?
All yours, Dylan.
Let's rewind a little bit and start back at the beginning. We have your book, Winner's Dream, here, Journey from Corner Store to Corner Office. And I'm wondering if you might elaborate a little bit on, you know, what the relevance of that corner store is and how that experience was formative for you.
I traded in 3 part-time jobs for 1 full-time job, which was that corner store. And I bought the business for $7,000. I had a loan for $5,500, $7,000 with interest. If you don't pay the person that loaned you the money, you lose everything. If you do pay them, you finish the loan off in a year. What did I learn? I learned that the customer is everything. And back then, I had to figure out what to do to win. Because when you're the small one, you have to do what either the big one chooses not to do or is structurally unable to do. Mm-hmm. So I was between 2 conglomerates. One was 7-Eleven, which was right next to the high school. And then there was Finest Supermarkets, and then there's my little old delicatessen in the middle. What did I learn? Well, first of all, I learned that you have to target your market. And in my case, there were 3 different constituents I had to serve better than my competition. The first was senior citizens. What do we know about senior citizens? Well, they probably would rather not leave the house unless they have to. So we delivered. No one else did. Then there were blue-collar workers like my dad, dressed in jeans and a t-shirt. They came in on Friday night, flush rich. They just got paid. But they were broke by Sunday morning. So what do? We gave them credit because no one else did.
Exactly.
Then there were these high school students. How do I get them to walk a block and a half past 7-Eleven to my store? Well, you got to go ask them why they're not coming. One day I go down there, there's 40 in a line waiting to get into the store, only 4 in 7-Eleven. I said, why are you all waiting out here? There's only 4 in there. It's a big store. They think we're going to take things. I said, don't worry about that. You come back with me. So I walk them down to my delicatessen, and here's where innovation comes in. I had built a video game room. Back in that era, believe it or not, you actually had to use quarters in a video game called Asteroids and Pac-Man and other dinosaur games to play the game. And young people loved to play those games. And they'd stand there all day pounding into those machines with quarters. So I'd let them stand in the game room, 40 at a time, feed them good food, treat them with respect, and to underscore why I know I'm right on the customer, being the most important thing, is one day a kid said to me, Bill, when we want to have good food, play video games, and be treated with respect, we come to your store. And when we want to steal stuff, we go to 7-Eleven.
Well, it's good they've got that distinction clear.
So it's all about the customer.
Of course, of course. I'll say it's interesting you mentioned video games. I'm sure, you know, the devices may have changed, but the behavior certainly hasn't.
Exactly.
I'm guilty of it from time to time. Now, Tom mentioned that you were Xerox's youngest division president, and I'm curious to know, what was that experience being like, so young and being, you know, thrust into a position with such responsibility, and, you know, how did that go for you? What did you learn from that?
Well, the first thing was selling the delicatessen when I graduated from college, after I put myself through college. I then had to make a decision, which many people here will have to make. What's my first career move in the professional world? And I made a decision that I was going to work for a big company that had a great brand, a great reputation, and a great training program. So I lived in an 1,100 square foot house in Amityville, Long Island. And every time there was a northeast storm, the house flooded because we backed up to a canal. It used to be a boathouse, by the way, and we made it a house. The day that I was interviewing for my dream job at Xerox, the house had 4.5 feet of water in it. So I'm walking down the stairs in my $99 suit to go on my interview in New York City. I get down within 5 steps of the bottom, and my brother puts me on his shoulder, carries me out to the street, and pours me into my dad's car so I wouldn't get my suit wet for the interview. My dad and I take a beautiful ride to the railroad together. As I'm getting out, I guarantee my father that I'm coming home that night with my employee badge in my pocket. My dad said, "Bill, don't put all that pressure on yourself. You're a good kid. Just do the best you can." I said, "I guarantee it." I get on the railroad. I read the annual report. There was a CEO then, David Kearns, who was reinventing the company on total quality management. Because Xerox was actually, think about this, Dylan, they were actually building products for a higher price than the competition was selling products for. And the competitive products were actually more reliable than Xerox products.
Quite a situation to be in.
Quite a situation. But by the time I get to Manhattan, I'm convinced I want to be the next David Kearns. I'm convinced I want to be CEO. I go into the hiring center. It was a little intimidating. I'm there from Long Island, kid in his $99 suit. There's all these sharp young people with great degrees and great pedigrees from affluent neighborhoods. And I said, man, I might have overdone it a little bit with my father. This looks like a pretty talented group. How am I coming out of here tonight with that badge? And you always get that moment where you have to compose yourself. Am I going to panic, or am I going to go back to what I do well? And what I do well is I talk to 500 people a day that come in and out of the store. So I just start talking to them. I'm like, hey, what are you in here for? What are you in here for? What are you trying to accomplish? What's your goals? And then we would start up conversations. And to a person, they'd say things like, I'm interviewing here, I'm interviewing there, IBM, Goldman Sachs, Merrill Lynch, I'm playing the field. What do you think I thought when they told me that? That was the moment I knew it was my day, because I wanted it so much more than they did. I get to my last interview. They say, you got to go uptown to meet the big boss at 9 West 57th Street, 38th floor overlooking Central Park. I finally make it into his office. They forgot me for a little while, but I got there. As I'm walking in, there he is. Very professional, beautifully groomed, great office overlooking Central Park. You know what I thought? This isn't just an office. This is heaven, man. And I'm like, I'm not in a job interview here. I'm in a fight for my life. Because if I get this job, my whole life changes. This is what I want. We sit down, I have a great meeting. At the end of the meeting, he said to me, Bill, thanks a lot for coming by. You had a great interview, and the HR department's going to be in touch with you in a couple of weeks. What do you think I said to him? Mr. Fullwood, I don't think you completely understand the situation, sir. He looks at me, kind of tilts his head, as if to say, what's up with this kid? And I said, I haven't broken a promise to my father in 21 years, and I can't start today. I guaranteed him I'd have my employee badge in my pocket when I got home to Amityville, Long Island tonight. Looks at me a little more, tilts his head even further, and he said, Bill McDermott, as long as you haven't committed any crimes, you are hired. I said, well, Mr. Fullwood, I certainly haven't committed any crimes, so does that mean I'm hired? And he goes, yes, it does. So, of course, in Bill McDermott fashion, I go around the table, probably where you're sitting, pick him up, hug him, move him around a little bit, put him back down safely. Then I get in the elevator, shoot down 38 floors. I'm out on 6th Avenue. I call my mom and dad, and I said, Mom and Dad, I got good news. I got the job. Break out the Corbel. We're going to celebrate tonight. And for those of you that may not know, Corbel is the inexpensive, worst champagne you could ever want. But it didn't matter, because that's what we could afford, and it was a great celebration. So that's where it started.
Yeah.
And then there's probably interesting things. I'll give you one, just to keep it rolling. Once you get the job, that's where the work begins. So I'm a trainee, and I have like the senior guy taking me around. So of course, I'm like the mule carrying the copier on my back, the electronic typewriter in one hand, the briefcase with the brochures in the other, and needless to say, I got the $99 suit going as well. We get a lead, we go into Manhattan, about 70-something Street and Madison Avenue. And what do we know about brownstones in New York? Well, first of all, it's August, it's like 95 in the shade with 110% humidity, and the sweat's rolling down my cheeks as I get there. And now I have to walk up 4 flights of stairs because there's no elevator. But I'm into it. This is the dream job. I get to the top step, I look across, and there she is. Wow. Like $1 million in the Chanel suit, looking sharp. She's obviously the CEO of this little company. And I'm feeling like this is my day. No sooner does that happen, and guess what happens next? Bam! This giant cat jumps on my shoulder, promptly proceeds to put its claws through my suit and my skin. It wasn't that I was actually worried about the skin, because I knew that would heal. But I was concerned about those claws coming back outside that $99 suit, thinking about what would be left of it. So, of course, I hold the cat. Love the cat. Good kid. Love kitties. Love kitties. The woman says, my goodness, you love animals, don't you? And I said, especially cats. And especially this cat. Garfield has nothing on this cat.
Yeah.
So we enter into this unbelievable conversation. And finally we get to the point where the senior guy said, Bill, like kid, plug in the machines and do the demo. So I look at her and I'm basically saying to myself, why do the demo? I asked her, do you need to see a demonstration? Because what happens with copy machines is you plug them in the wall, they got a green button, hit the green button, makes copy. And then the typewriter, this one's electronic. Same keyboard as that one you have over there, the oldie, but this one's faster because it's electronic. You need to see a demo? She's like, no. I said, okay. And then I said, how many will you take? She's like, I'll take them both, honey. You know, fills out the order agreement. I leave her copy for her. We get down to the front door of the brownstone, and the guy said to me, Bill McDermott, you're either going to be the CEO of Xerox or you're going to jail. I'm like, what's with the jail thing, you know? But that was the early days, and then it evolved into so many steps. So I'll let you ask me the questions about the steps.
Well, let's say it's interesting you talk about that tenacity, and I think that's something that's ever so important, going out and getting that job and making sure you have that tenacity when you walk into the interview. But yeah, let's fast forward a little bit to your work at SAP. In 2002, you became the CEO of SAP North America, and I'm curious to know sort of what was the situation when you walked in on day one, and how has that experience brought you to where you are today?
Well, first of all, I think it's relevant to know that I would have never left Xerox had Xerox evolved the way my mind thought Xerox needed to evolve. Because those early dreams, when you are a winner and you do have dreams, they never die. But I was in a business then that was growing at 50%, but it was the early days of cloud and digital documents and simplification of consumption, all the terms that you know today. Mm-hmm. And the core business was selling boxes. And that business was declining. But people at that time loved the margins on those boxes so much. They couldn't handle the fact that they might be entering into an era of lower margins and more risk with a cloud consumption model. So eventually I did accept an offer to be a president of another company, and I made the change. And I never looked back, of course, but I always wondered what it would have been like if I would have had a chance to see those dreams through there. But I still love the company and the people, and we have great memories. Coming into SAP, I've been CEO for 6 years now. I was the CEO in 2010. Then we had a co-CEO structure, and as you mentioned, in 2014, I became the sole CEO. But here's the idea, and here's the formula. And it's always the same formula, so I'll lay it out for you. And I explain it in many different stories in Winner's Dream. At that time, SAP was coming off of the 2008 financial crisis, which everybody knows about in the world. 2009 was a slow recovery for the global economy. SAP had to change with the times. And in 2010, the board felt that SAP needed new leadership, and a la yours truly becomes co-CEO. In the beginning, what did I work on? Strategy. Really thinking about what the vision and the purpose of this company had to be to remain a market leader. And we asked ourselves a tough question, like, if we weren't around, would anybody care? Would it really matter? And we started to think about, yeah, we're in 25 industries, 150, 170, 180 countries, depending on how you did the math then, now even more. And the applications and the analytics that SAP supplied to those companies were mission critical in turning the lights on and running those businesses. So we did matter. Mm-hmm. But we also realized that we were the applications and analytics market leader, but the market growth was slowing and the world was changing very fast. And what happened to the world then? If you remember, that was, believe it or not, the real early stages of the mobile craze, the mobile device. When you think about bring your own device to work, you think about mobile computing, you think about mobile applications, you think about the iPad. It had just come out at the end of like 2009. We were piloting it, and it was just out in 10. Steve Jobs didn't even, at that time, according to what he told me, didn't even think it was going to be an enterprise product in big numbers. He thought it was going to be more of a consumer product. So at that time, we said, where's the world going? Mobile and the explosion of mobile was causing an unbelievable amount of data to be created. So data was doubling in the world every 18 months then. We knew that yesterday's disk-based database was a 20th century architecture that could not keep up with the explosion of data. We said we have to solve this problem. In there lies the ambition for SAP HANA, invented by the great Hasso Plattner, the founder of SAP. The second thing we said, we had to take the company to the cloud, because ease of consumption, beautiful user experience, radical simplification in helping people do their work better. So we go for the cloud. And then we also said, in a global economy, inter-enterprise computing, how companies collaborate with one another, with their trading partners, with their customers, is going to be huge. And when we sized that market, it was a 10 trillion market for business networks, and it was a 500 billion network for the cloud in the enterprise applications and the new data model I took you through. So we invented HANA. We refactored SAP ERP to S/4HANA, 21st century architecture. We went from 0 users in the cloud to 100 million, more than any other company in the enterprise, and we invented a new category called Business Network. All of that started in that original strategy meeting in 2010. But the most important learning is this. We had a vision to make the world run better, and then we said, no, help the world run better. Be humble and improve people's lives. So everything we do has to help the world run better and improve people's lives. So whether we were inventing something organically, we were doing large-scale M&A, we were inventing new categories, if it didn't take on that high standard, we didn't do it. Today, that's the same vision and the same enduring cause in 2016 as it was in 2010. My message, you got to have a vision. You have to have a strategy that radically intensifies the size of your addressable market. You need to combine organic and inorganic innovation to stay ahead of market competitors, but also to do one very, very important thing. You must give customers products that they didn't even know they needed, but once you gave it to them, they did not know how they ever lived without it. If you can pull that off, you got yourself a market leader, you got yourself a winner.
Absolutely, and I think that same formula rings true for the Apple and the iPhone back when they first came out. Nobody knew they needed a smartphone, but now you can't live without them.
I know, you'd have hives if it wasn't in your pocket, right?
Exactly.
I know.
So you talked a lot about SAP is definitely on the forefront of enterprise computing and cloud technologies, and cloud is sort of is starting to become fairly mainstream now, which is just mind-boggling in and of itself. But I'm wondering what's next. What is big on the horizon for SAP?
Well, first of all, what I put on the table today is in and of itself huge. And one of the things I always remember is finish the house one room at a time. And don't run off just because you've got something started before you finish it. So what we try to do is execution is an art form. And just like innovation is an art form, make sure you finish the job that you started. So I think this idea of having a database that is a transactional and an analytics database all in one still has unbelievable room to reinvent business models and innovate business models. So that's definitely there. We absolutely need to take on the world's biggest problems, because the world's biggest problems are also the world's biggest opportunities. So healthcare is one thing that I'm personally extremely passionate about. Mm-hmm. The idea of taking moonshots against cancer and beating that dreadful disease. The idea of personalizing medicine so you can keep people healthier, living happier, and more beautiful lives. All of this ties into our ambition to help every industry rethink the business that they're in. I left a retailer today, and I'm on the board of a company that makes sports apparel, Under Armour. It's not just about the shirt and the shoe, it's about the nanotechnology connecting to the device, connecting to the channel, connecting to the community. And then you say to yourself, well, what business are you in? Well, you might even be in the healthcare business, because you're keeping people healthier and you're improving their lives. So we have to do that in every industry scenario. Healthcare is on the top of my mind, but it's certainly not limited to healthcare. I strongly believe that small, medium-sized enterprises deserve the same intellectual firepower as the big ones. So I think we need to do a much bigger job in small and medium, and that's certainly something we intend to bring to the world. Beautiful cloud-based solutions in the global economy so small entrepreneurs can get all the firepower that the big ones have gotten for the last 40 plus years. That's among the ambitions. It's certainly not limited to that.
I'm sure it's you've got a vast list of exciting new
Exactly.
possibilities. So, I know you talk about that, and everything is changing technologically speaking so quickly now. And I'm wondering, we might shift gears now, but these students, and some of whom I'm sure are graduating, and then in a couple of months coming up, are walking into a very different economy and a very different job market than you did when you at sort of our age. And I'm wondering what advice you would have for BCIT students, getting ready to go out into that job market and enter the workforce.
But the first thing is, I feel so close to you because I have the same hunger today than I had when I was 21. And nothing by my own personal standards has gotten any less enthusiastic or passionate about wanting it more. So my first piece of advice is, whatever you love and whatever you think you really want to commit yourself to, and I did say commit yourself, it's not a one-sided deal. Like somehow I keep hearing people talk about, we want to bring young people into the company. We really want to develop young people. We really want to make our company attractive to young people. Of course you do. But what you really do for young people, if you want to make them the best they can be, is you want them to commit to a mission so they understand what it is to be all in, and their skills and the enjoyment of the work itself is something they derive immense pleasure from, because that'll build the stepping stone to great successes later on. Mm-hmm. So job one is do something that you're really passionate about. And I try not to say that you really love, because you may not know yet. But once you get in the game, you'll figure it out. But be all in. SAP, for example, I had the great pleasure of meeting our employees here in Vancouver. This is a great marketplace, by the way. And some of the things we do here is we invented analytics here. We invent visualization on that analytics. We bring things like digital boardrooms to companies all over the world, and we export it from here all over the world. And the list goes on and on. So I would also advise people, don't live only by the paradigms of where you think opportunities are. Give yourself time to learn not only what a company does because it's got a brand that's consumer recognizable, but also get into the culture of companies. Get into, what am I going to learn? What am I going to receive in terms of training and preparing me for the best possible career I can have. So think long, even though I understand the world is not necessarily committing itself to you or you to some company for an eternity. But you got to think long view. But finally, be curious, And when I say curious, I don't just mean like, let's, have fun and roast marshmallows and think about ideas. I mean, like, be curious. If you're dealing with a CEO, it's like, look, what do you do? And how do you do your job? And what's on your mind? And what would somebody like me, if I was in your job, have to do to have a perfect day in the life of you? It's like, talk to everybody. Listen to everybody. Be open to everybody's story. You might be surprised. Occasionally you come up with an idea or two. And don't be afraid of anything. The idea of staying in your own little world because that's where you're safe or that's where there's no risk, I just think it prevents you from taking advantage of so many interesting opportunities and so many interesting conversations. So be bold, be a winner, have dreams.
Yeah, absolutely. And that whole concept of take a risk, because the only way you'll see those rewards is if you take that risk.
One of the things I talk about in Winner's Dream, sometimes all you have is the dream. And perhaps even the world isn't listening. And it might actually be something that even yourself, you have your doubts as to whether or not you can hit it. And the point is not to worry so much about that. The point is to be loyal to the biggest idea, the biggest future you can envision for yourself, no matter what career that is. Whatever really turns you into the best you can be. And don't let it go. And I put a beautiful poem in there called Ithaca, which I encourage you when you read the book to read that. Because if you stay true to that winner's dream, nothing's going to deter you from your ultimate destination, except you. You're the only one that could.
Absolutely. Okay, well, I know we're going to take some audience questions in just a minute, but I've got one last one for you.
Sure.
I know you mentioned just sort of your passion in getting SAP involved in healthcare, and I know you have a bit of a connection to sort of healthcare, and I'm wondering if you mind talking about some of the challenges that you've been through. I know you recently spent some time in hospital, and if you'd share a bit of that story.
Sure. Well, this has been fairly well reported, so I won't take you through the whole thing. But last July, I was seriously injured, and I woke up in a situation by myself where I was seriously injured and cut, and it was kind of like a forensic file scene waiting to happen. And there is a moment where your mind basically tells you, hey, it's okay, lay down, rest, go to sleep, see how it goes. Because if you choose to get up, life is going to get a whole lot harder on you. And then there's that other part of you, which is your will. And your will says to you, hey, wait a minute now. You got a great family. You got 77,000 women and men that count on you, and you count on them at SAP. And what you need to do is get up, get out, and get on with it. So what I did is I found a way to get out, and I got lucky. Somebody was a kind person and called 911, and the first responders came. And before too long, I was in a Trauma 1 medical center and getting surgery and the whole thing to put me back together again. And people say to me, wow, that's amazing. That must have really brought out your character. That brings out the character in you. And I said, no, but I tell you what, it reveals the character in you. You know everything about who you are in times of controversy and challenge and life and death situations. You know everything there is to know about you. And I often tell people, we're all going to get knocked down in life. They'll never remember you for how hard you got knocked down, but they'll never forget you for how strong you got up and keep moving forward.
Oh, wow. Quite a moving story. Thank you very much for that.
My pleasure.
All right, and I understand we're going to go to some questions from the audience. We have some in person, and as well as I believe we have some questions from Twitter. We'll get the house lights brought up. If there's anybody that has a question for Bill. Got a couple of mics down at the front here. Jake?
Gentlemen.
Got one question here.
Okay, we've got one down front here.
First of all, thank you very much for your very moving story. I've taken a course about SAP last term, and then just seeing the CEO of SAP is such an amazing experience. I'm just wondering, as being a CEO, there are a lot of the things that are on your priority list, but how do you decide which one to get done first? So how do you prioritize your task?
That's a really good question. So as the CEO of SAP, how do you prioritize what to get done first? There's so many things that you could do. How do you do it? And to keep it simple, I believe in a philosophy that goes a little bit like the dream, the winner's dream, the big picture. Where are we going 5, 10, 20 years from now? And then how are we going to eat today? And I think that dreams and details have to come together in a coherent way, where you have a vision, you have a strategy that looks around corners into the future. Of course, you're always going to modify that, because the world and the velocity of the speed of the world, which you know very well, is changing. It'll make any strategy outdated in 12 months. So the best you can do is take a long time horizon and build in a future that you think is the right one, but also having the agility and the humility to change it and really architect the idea of constant innovation from everywhere, and the best ideas have to win, and you'll probably evolve even your mid and your long-term strategy. And then, on a day-to-day basis, where can you put yourself? Where can you put your management team? What can you do to put your company in a position to win today? So I try to balance that each and every day with things that are touching the long term and things that are absolutely putting food on the table today. And it's a constant process. It's one that I don't think good leaders ever think they got right, because you're constantly making sure you keep getting better at it. You got to keep getting better and better and better at wringing all the value you can at every minute of every day. Did that answer your question? Thank you. And it's an honor for the SAP CEO to see you, too.
Thanks, Bill. I believe we had another one. There we are.
Thanks, Bill.
Hi.
In the book, you mentioned that you've taken a lot of risks throughout your career, like buying the deli, meeting the VP, general manager of Xerox Eastern region, taking a job at Puerto Rico and coming back. And they all panned out, obviously. Have there been any occasions where you took in a risk, but it didn't pan out, and how do you react to it?
Absolutely. So you've taken a lot of risks. Most of them have panned out. Have there been ones that you took and it didn't work out? Of course, in a span of everyone's career, you're going to make some decisions almost on a daily basis that didn't work out exactly as you wanted it to. But the big picture things, the things that really matter, most of the time, even if you're taking a risk, they will work out if you have the humility and the agility to change on the fly. Example, Puerto Rico, you mentioned it. I go into Puerto Rico from New York City, newly married with a newborn baby, beautiful life, everything good. Why would you go to Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands and take that risk? You're Mr. New York. You know, they're going to give you whatever you want in New York. Why do that? There's two reasons. One, I think the person that always has to have the perfect job. What's my salary? What's my bonus? What's my car? Where are you going to put me up? How are you going to remember what a great guy I am? That's one type of employee. And then there's another one that says, I bet these people in important positions are smart enough to realize that if I do something that takes a risk, and I do it in good faith and in service to my company, I bet they'll remember me someday when it comes time for promotion and upward mobility and fulfillment of my dreams. So at that time, people told me, that was a crazy risk. Why do you do this? You blew it, man. You could have been running New York. Why you go for this? So was that a risk? Was that a miss? Maybe, actually. But I go to Puerto Rico, and here's an idea. I have my whole vision and my strategy mapped out in my mind. But I realize, just like meeting Garfield, that I got to read the room. And the room doesn't want to hear the American with the vision and the strategy dictating the pace to them. They want a humble person that listens to them. So for 2 weeks, I listened to what they want. You know what they told me they want? They want a vision. They want to be inspired when they come to work, and they want their Christmas party back. And then I say to myself, okay, who would perform for you at the Christmas party? What would we wear? Paint the event. Let's dream. Well, it would be Gilbertito Santa Rosa, the #1 salsa singer in Puerto Rico. We would do it at the El San Juan Hotel, the most glorious hotel in Puerto Rico. The men would be in black tie. The women would wear cocktail dresses and beautiful heels, and we'd dance until 3 o'clock in the morning. I said, I come back tomorrow. We talk about it. That night, I hire Gilbertito. I come back the next day to the meeting. Now follow this. This is a risk. Could have been a mistake. I get in front of them. I'm like, I got good news for you. We're going to focus on the customer. That's our vision. I'm putting the water back on the shelves. We're going to start letting you eat again. The other guy cut all the water and all the food out of the equation. God forbid you should be hydrated and have food in you, you know? You might even be more productive. And I'm bringing back the Christmas party. I hired Gilbertito Santa Rosa. Wow! Everybody goes crazy. They're doing Rocky push-ups. Puño, senor, you're the greatest, blah, blah, blah. I take an immediate risk right on the fly there. Some could say a mistake. That room was on fire with excitement. What do? I basically take a risk, I take a chance. I said, no. I know you're happy. We do not wish to dance to Gilbertito or anyone else as the number 64 out of 64 operations in Xerox. We choose to dance as the number 1 in the world, and we will do it this year. That's a risk. What do you think happened? Instantaneously, I could have called it a failure. All the energy goes out of the room. Silence. They're probably dreaming, like, how do we get this gringo back on the next boat to New York City? But I say, just hang in there. You trust me, I trust you. Let's take it one day at a time. We trust each other. And I didn't leave a pumped up room. I didn't leave people elated and excited. I took that away. But one day at a time, 1 week at a time, 1 month at a time, confidence builds. Things start to happen. Actions start to get taken. They go from 64 to 55 to 50 to 40 to 30. Now we're going around the corner into the finish of the year. They're in the top 10, top 5. We bypass the number 1 and we win. We become the number 1 in that year. I had a lot of people tell me that it was a mistake that day. Sometimes you can make a mistake that day. I think I might have. But if you stick to your values and what you really believe, and you hang in there, even on what looks like a mistake on Monday, by Monday 6 months from then, it might be a genius move, and you might have had the instincts to call something. So the other one, when I left Xerox, I became the president of a publicly traded company. I thought it was the best move. Financially, everything looked great. But I tell the story in the book, how I got hit with thunderbolts on a human level, on a personal level, where I had a challenge with my wife and her health and everything else. I definitely thought that was a mistake on that day. Probably the biggest one I had made to that point. Because I let go of the first winner's dream. I chose change over hanging on for the dream. And then I got hit with the thunderbolt that was completely beyond my control. Was it a mistake? Definitely that day it was a mistake. Probably the biggest one I ever made. But I guess what? Had I not done it, I wouldn't be sitting here today. No way. The pattern wouldn't have come together, at least for this moment, and we wouldn't have been in this room on this day together. So what I am trying to say is, of course there's been a lot of mistakes. Of course there's a lot of things that you messed up. But the point is, you gotta stay with your decisions. You gotta find ways to fight through the pain of difficulties and disappointments and setbacks. Because today's setback might be tomorrow's winner's dream come true, and you'll never know unless you have the resilience to stay with it. That is the truth. That is the answer that nobody ever heard gives. And as a person that lives for big decisions, I kindly ask you to be kind to yourself when you make decisions or when you have setbacks, because they're happening for a reason. You just don't know it yet.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Fantastic. Thanks, Bill. I think we've got about time for one or two more. We got one over there. Go ahead.
All right. So you say be a winner, have dreams, right? And that's very interesting to me because, like, with us at BCIT, we're flooded with like a lot of things to do.
Yeah.
And a lot of opportunities, like different pathways to go about. Like my question is, have you ever been swayed from your dream and from your vision? And if so, like how have you overcome that?
It's a great question. I mean, I gave you one example of when I left Xerox, you know, the first dream. I didn't get swayed from it. I still had it, but I didn't want to wait around when they weren't executing on my strategy that I believed in. So I wouldn't have been in integrity with a company that I loved to pretend like I was all in on a strategy I didn't believe in. So that would be one example. Another example is, and probably the biggest one, is every time I've hit the winner's dream, the goalpost moved out again. So the biggest lesson I can teach you about being a winner and having dreams, it is a journey. It's not a destination. So every time you set a goal for yourself and you attain it, the celebrations for me are really short. They don't last. It's like the day I hit it, I'm already thinking about where we're going tomorrow. So what I can tell you is what I believe the winner's dream is about being fully committed with every ounce of passion you have to the dream, and recognize along the way, as you hit milestones and goals, and what you thought to be the dream at 21 will evolve and change. And ultimately, when you catch these dreams, as you chase them, you'll find that you didn't arrive anywhere. You simply found another mark to move the goalpost out again, to do something better, something different, something more significant. That, to me, is what keeps it all fresh. That's why today I feel as fresh in terms of dream chasing as you do. And guess what? In my world, there's a lot of things we have to do and focus on too. And some of what you have to do is figure out what's worth your time and your energy and your passion and what isn't. And half the battle of being a dreamer that's a winner is figuring out as much what not to do as what to do, and having those internal filters and those mechanisms very alert in your system. So when you do apply yourself, you're applying it to things that in your definition, in your winner's dream, on your terms, really matter. If you try to take on all the priorities they're going to lay on your desk, whether it's here or somewhere else, you'll never be in a life and in a dream state that's true to yourself. Only you can get true to yourself. That's it. I actually had people tell me, when I was in my 20s, don't have passion. Don't be too aggressive. Don't be so goal-oriented. Don't, when you're your first manager, say you're in service to the people that work for you. Show them your authority. Show them your power over them. And I'm like, wow, that's an interesting way of looking at it. I never thought of it that way. Because I actually figured I could get anything in this life I wanted as long as I help enough other people get what they want. But I stayed true to my definition of doing it my way. And I think that's the key to all of this. Just be authentic and be human and be real with yourself. In the book, I went to this German women's book club, and there was about 30 women there. And there was one that said to me, I have these 2 young girls, and the advice your mother gave you, and I tell the story in the book of the best part of you is you. She basically took that segment out and put it on her refrigerator with a magnet. And every day she reads it to her daughters and tells them, I love you. And the best part of you is you. And just be you. And that's always going to be good enough for me. And I think when you love somebody unconditionally, that's how you guide them. I think people need to be kinder to themselves and be truer to themselves and work harder at answering that question for themselves than they do. And I feel bad for a lot of young people today because they have so many things coming at them and so many people telling them what they should do and so much overhang with society's desires of what they should be. And they've never had enough time to sit back and form a winner's dream and reconcile their winner's dream on their terms. And if I did anything today to help you find that one stripe of value in you and help you recognize that the best part of you is you and it's your dream that really matters and that's what makes you a winner, then it was a great moment in my life.
Fantastic. Wise words. Thanks, Bill. I think we're about up to time for questions, unless we've got one more going. See one more up in the back there. One last one.
So you talked a lot about forming a vision and committing to it, even if you don't know if you love it or not yet. My question for you is, what advice would you give for, say, a startup company or a small company when they're forming their vision while they're dealing with competition and a lot of negative energy from competition?
Yeah, I mean, if you think about delicatessen, I had a lot of competition too. And the story I gave you in the beginning here was thinking about, the little one has to think about what the big one either chooses not to do or is structurally unable to do. So you can deliver something to the world that no one else can. And even if they can, and you're still willing to compete with them, you have to have a dimension of your product or your solution or your services that differentiates you. In fact, my prices were the highest, by far, because I couldn't buy in enough quantity to compete on price. And the first time I did a pricing scheme to lower price and use it as a loss leader, what do you think the competition did? What do you think? They lowered price even more. What do you think that did? It actually reinforced what I should have known before I made that mistake. There's another mistake, which is don't compete against the enemy's strengths. Go places that they either structurally can't, they choose not to. So I was lavish in customer service. And I knew that that was going to be my business model. And then I was going to segment the market based on that service, whether it was the senior citizens, the blue-collar workers, or the high school kids. It's not different today. Of course, it's a different size, it's a different scale. Now it's, how do I help you innovate your business model? How do I help you go into industries you didn't even know you should be in? But if you don't get in, 3 years from now when your competition does, you'll be an also-ran. How do we, rethink simplicity in the enterprise so you can execute, differently than everyone else? So at SAP, we have our way of doing that. At the deli, I had my way of doing that. But in both cases, you had to think about, what are your advantages? How do you differentiate against the competition? And basically, how do you win? And I think if you, give it that litmus test, nobody can deter you just because it's a competitive landmine. There's very few of them out there that aren't. There's always going to be competition. You got to look at competition as making you better. I'm on the board of one company in particular. When a board member says to that CEO, hey, you got this competitor that's doing this or the other competitor that's doing that, you know what he says? I can't listen. And people are like, why can't you listen? Because if I obsess on what they're doing, I won't invent what I should be doing to be different, better, completely connected to my consumer in ways they can't. That's why I go back to, it's all about the customer. I think we're ending kind of where we started. And your relationship and the depth and the intimacy that you can achieve, that's what beats your competition. Make sense? again, what they structurally cannot do or what they choose not to do. Okay? Think about that.
All right, fantastic. Wise words. Thanks, Bill. Unfortunately, I think that's about all we've got time for questions from our audience. So I'm going to throw it back over to Tom to wind things up.
Which is my cue. Thank you very
Thank
much. What a wonderful evening, you two. That was fantastic. Bill, thanks
Thank
so
you.
much
Thank
for
you.
your
Thank you.
for your work.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Tom. How about Dylan? Great
And also
interview, huh?
Dylan, thanks
Dylan,
so
way
much.
to go, man.
Bill.
Thank you. Thank you, my friend.